Hey, what's up, y'all? So I wanted to take a quick minute to do a hot take follow up on the video I did yesterday regarding you are not self-made. I know there was probably a few people who seen that who felt some type of way or didn't agree with me, and I think that, like I said in the beginning in the video and also in the description of the video, it was haphazard type of discussion, and it was kind of long. So I know not everybody was able to ascertain the full scope of it, and you probably glazed over. So I want to just take like quick 10, maybe 15, if that minutes, and kind of explain a little bit more about it. I have to say that this discussion that I have starts with two things. First of all, the idea or the phrase "you are not self-made" or "you're self-made." Self-made. I understand that the phrase actually means someone who's created their success through their own hard work. The thing about that becomes also is that it kind of otherwise it kind of spells out that basically if you have somehow been considered successful, whatever successful is, that there are people who did not create their success and people who created their success. So that means already you have differentiation between what types of success there could be. I'm not here to grade people. What I'm saying is that when we talk about that language, that's kind of what that's entailing, right? There's got to be people who are not self-made and there are people who are self-made. I'm not here to really discuss like grading individuals in that way or not. What I'm talking about is not actually that ideology of you haven't put in work to create something. I think everybody who's been even paid by a big corporation, and even if they make millions from a big corporation as a W-2 employee, has actually put in the work to actually get that money. Because at the end of the day, no company is paying anyone for things they don't need from that person or that they don't deem them worthy to pay them for. Even if you talk about the CEOs and we feel as the public that these people are getting overpaid for what they do, the reality is that these companies think that they're worth it. And that's a whole discussion to be had. And even the CEOs will just take it because we're all honestly basically selfish. We will take more money than we don't need. Just like I talked about in that video, that if you have the right culture or the right training or kind of the right sensitivity modifications, you will be willing to go into debt to buy things you don't need, like things you really honestly don't need. And so that really is what I'm talking about, is the idea that how things are normalized starts to open doors for behaviors you can take on and do yourself. Why is this on this channel in terms of the black and plain channel? Why is Darvell talking about this on a channel that is germane to really black politics? It's because I need to rebuild a foundation of viewing things a little differently. I need to set up some tools for people to understand how all of this stuff works together and how nothing, of course, is not, nothing's new, but also you cannot come to me and say that people did things to themselves that they didn't do to themselves. We love to put that on people because it's really, again, it's about the one-upsmanship culture of trying to say that I'm better than you, which is actually part of the same vein that I'm self-made comes from when you get into the honest truth about the idea of you having cultivated something from nowhere out of a vacuum that has made you something that you were not prior. That's not true. You have put in effort, definitely, but everyone else who's getting paid has as well, right? Everyone else who's made something happen has done it as well, right? Otherwise, there are very few people you're going to sit up to me and say these people are not self-made. Like, let's even talk about Jeff Bezos and his example, because I've seen a little 4x4 meme running around in the past where they talk about these tech CEOs are not self-made because they got money from, their parents or something like that. Here's the thing. I'm not here to tell you that these people did not start off with an advantage or they didn't get a big step up or these things like that actually made the difference between them being able to do it or even doing it at all and actually being successful to whatever extent they were successful. I'm not here to say that they did not get that head start or these things like that. I'm not here to say that they don't create organizations that end up oppressing or suppressing people from having their own financial gains be realized in an equitable way. What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, the crazy thing is even these folks did something that got them where they were. And I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm not saying I like them. What I'm saying is that they took some action. And if that action earned any money for them, whether it be wrong or right, you could say they're self-made. So how many people out here are not self-made if you talk about it like that? So then you get into the point where basically anybody who gets a paycheck is self-made. So that's one way to look at it, right? And I know you're not going to hear that. You're not going to like it. It's fine. It's a discussion, right? Sometimes I have to say things that are not actually correct in order for us to have a discussion around what's correct. Because if you hear something you like, you just you just click away. But if you hear something you don't like, you might click and then you downvote and then come back and tell someone else you're dumb. And I got to have a discussion. The other side of it is this. When we talk about the concept of why being self-made is an important thing to understand in the scope of Black politics, you have to understand that what I'm saying in the prior videos, that everyone's a product of their DNA and environment. And their environment is made up of a multitude of inputs, constraints, and things that existed before they existed, and things that whittle on around them through not only their childhood, but their adult life. And any Black person who understands the socioeconomic state of Black America will understand very quickly that Black people didn't create a negative fate for themselves just by their own will. We have a history of trying and building and doing and being successful, and then it being torn down and things being taken from us that we didn't have any control over, even when we fought back. We have a history of coming from enslavement in the United States of America that has set a tone in America for how they see descendants of American slavery. And that is very able to be, we can very singularly focus and understand that specific to descendants of American slavery and not specific to just all Black people in general. Everyone understands, and there's already data out there from the Federal Reserve that show that even Black immigrants do better than Black descendants of American chattel slavery in America, in the United States of America. So we know that there's things that are very specific that create cultures, that create environments, that create outcomes for people before they're able to even enter the environment. Once they get there, that environment impacts them. The things they're told or showed or constricted from or not shown even, that helps shape where they're going to go or not. The honest truth. Let's be real. You know how that's true because we're going to talk about something that I think really sparked my thought around this whole discussion of being self-made, or more importantly, how your environment and DNA really impact who you become. And what we're going to talk about is a tweet that came out back in December of 2024 from Vivek Ramaswamy. It became a very heated debate around this tweet. So let me pull that tweet up real quick and show you all what I am talking about. Okay, so right here we see this tweet from Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm going to read a bit of it. If you haven't heard of it, you should hear it now. Vivek posted, and he was one of the top guys running with Trump during the last, home stretch of his campaign. And for president in 2024, Vivek was a big supporter of him along with Elon Musk. And so Vivek was appointed to this fictitious or this fabricated department that they've come up with called Doge. And when Vivek was kind of promoted through his own attempt to run for president, then subsequently becoming a supporter of Trump and then becoming an appointee to this Doge Department of Government Efficiency group that Trump is planning to erect. This really brought Vivek into like America's spotlight culture. Nationally in a bigger way than I think he had been before. But he made this tweet that really became a hot topic. He says, the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficiency. A key part of the reason comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s. And that doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. A culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World or Zach and Slater over Screech in Saved by the Bell or Stefan over Steve Urkel in Family Matters will not produce the best engineers. In fact, I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who actively limited how much their kids could watch TV, which shows TV shows precisely because they promoted mediocrity, and these kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. Blah, blah, blah. He talks about some more movies and stuff. He says more movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends, more math tutoring, fewer sleepovers, more weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, more books, less TV, more creating, less chilling, more extracurriculars, less hanging out at the mall. Most normal American parents look skeptically at those kinds of parents. More normal American kids view such of those kinds of kids with scorn. If you grow up aspiring to normalcy, normalcy is what you will achieve. Now, close your eyes and visualize which families you knew in the 90s who raise their kids according to one model versus the other. Be brutally honest. Normalcy doesn't cut it in a hyper-competitive global market for technical talent, and if we pretend like it does, we'll have our asses handed to us by China. This can be our Sputnik moment, waking from a slumber before we can do it again. Blase Blah talks about Trump. So here's the key thing about this tweet that really got me kind of popping, right? I'm an engineer, and he's talking about China producing the best engineers because of culture. And he's saying that Chinese culture really pushes children at a young age to learn math, become very comfortable and very competent at it, and then move on into other STEM areas such as chemistry, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, computer engineering, and things like this. And then it produces people who will go to school for engineering or different engineering related disciplines and come out and go into technical fields that create abundance of technical developments, innovations, and essentially money in wealth for their country and for the world. And what he's saying is that these people were so smart because they have come through a culture that forced them to go to, not you just forced them, but molded them to go through this, that these are why we need to go get these people from overseas and give them these H-1B visa, these H-1B visas. These H-1B visa is essentially a program that allows companies here in America that are based in the U.S. to hire people who are not U.S. citizens from abroad to work here on our soil if they have certain academic and professional criteria met that can't seem to be fulfilled using American citizens that are already here. It's a whole controversial program because people talk about H-1B visa employees as kind of being controlled because, you know, they have to stay at that company for a while when they get that visa, and the company has to invest a bunch of money to get the visa for them, and it's a whole process. And so they don't also get paid as much as a regular American for the same job. And so it becomes almost like an indentured servitude sort of situation. And so it's a big deal when we talk about these H-1Bs, because Americans claim that these H-1Bs are taking American jobs, which you can conceivably say yes, because the simple idea is that the job would be there and somebody would eventually take it if they couldn't get someone from abroad. But if they can get someone from abroad and it costs them less money per year to hire and maintain that person, it becomes financially competitive for the H-1B person to be given a job over an American who doesn't need all of that and will demand what they're worth. That aside, the point of this has to do with the statement that he said culture. He said American culture. He said mediocrity over excellence. Why can he say culture? Because he knows how the Chinese became so wildly successful in STEM. It's because of their environment. It's not their DNA as much, right? It's not really even their DNA, because all this DNA stuff that I spoke about, it has some play in the background to the tendencies you're going to have, and maybe some of the weaknesses and natural strengths you're going to have, and your biases that are natural to kind of things you want to do, like the colors you like, the things you might like, and things you might not like, but it's going to have a general tendency in nature. It's not going to be specific that you must do certain things. What ends up happening is that these general tendencies in your DNA that come through kind of like as you're first born and you develop over time, these things are exposed to the environment and they latch on to things that are in the environment that they like. So a child might like painting more than coloring because they're first induced to painting, and then later they learn that they can use crayons and color paper, but they like creating things with color because they like vivid colors. That's just naturally part of their DNA, so they're going to latch onto that type of artistic expression. And then as new things become introduced to them, they're able to either latch on to newer things that seem to speak more to their core, or they're able to start to develop their own ideas, knowing things that have come before that point. Kind of like their own brain starts to be able to naturally innovate some new way of producing art, right? So you get the stained glass, and then you might even get to graffiti with, you know, really bright colors, whatever. These things come about because of your natural DNA tendencies, and then, of course, last but not least, your environment, your environmental exposures, and the things that you know that you have as tools in your toolkit that you can grab. So anyway, we say all this because, you know, I don't totally agree with Vivek. I'm not a fan of him. I'm not here to promote Vivek. He just brings a conversation to the forefront that people were really going in on for a while in late December. And the fact is, his point shows that children are highly highly influenced by their parents. The parents will tell them they need to be in certain sports clubs. The parents will have them, in certain schools or organizations that the parents went to or were grandfathered into. The parents will also have businesses that they end up handing down. And one of the most important things is that the parents will also, especially with immigrants that we know of, if we look at anywhere from Asia to even the African immigrants, these folks tended to be pushed into higher paying, more technical fields. What Vivek got wrong here is that we don't need to allow people to want to do other fields that are not STEM related. We need folks of all stripes and all walks. And so we need to let our children's natural biases and natural desires to take hold and really feed into where they're going, and let them kind of be exposed to everything and let them naturally go into where they want to go. That's what American culture has kind of tried to do. And unfortunately, I think it's gotten a little bit to the left. He had a good example about Stefan over Steve Urkel, because Stefan was glorified compared to Steve Urkel. Steve Urkel was known as smart in Family Matters, but he was also kind of like not cool, right? And that was kind of the problem with that whole archetype on that show with Steve Urkel versus Stefan. Everybody loved Stefan, right? Stefan was always smooth. Stefan never really had any negatives to him, but Urkel was lambasted with negatives. Although he was smart, it was not really worth it being Urkel, other than the fact you might make a lot of money and people might find you dorkily cute or maybe socially awkward, and so they're kind to you and they don't treat you directly. But those sorts of things are not really helping our culture, and he's right to that degree. There are other things I'm not agreeing with him on, but what I will say is that these things start in the home, they start in the childhood, and that's why it's so important to understand that environment and DNA really do set the course for people. You say, oh, well, my child does whatever they want to. That's not what I'm talking about. I hope your child does whatever they want to. Now, I talked about professional areas of study. That's a very important thing, right? Because a lot of times children take after their parents. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a doctor, so I became a doctor. Girls take after their moms sometimes, and boys definitely are more likely to take after their dads. And again, not siding with Vivek. I'm just saying he's got a good example here, because, and everyone knows that a lot of Asian cultures, especially the Chinese, are focused on getting people through STEM and getting people to focus up on building not only their own country, but they brought over to America, they're very valuable, right? That's what happens there. So, as an example, that's a really good example of very clearly how Asian culture, specifically the Chinese, are gung-ho, fast and furious, making a great example for what I was talking about in the other video, that your environment will help dictate your future. Therefore, you're not a product of just your own making. You're not self-made per se. You didn't put yourself together. You got put together before you even knew you existed, right? So understand that. Now, let me give you two more examples that pertain here to America and not just Chinese culture. Let's look at this chart here. Here's a chart here. This is actually from U.S. Census Bureau 2022 Annual Business Survey. And what it's looking at is the top 6 sectors of business sectors that Hispanic Americans or Hispanic immigrants engage in here in the U.S. And what you see here are 2 sectors that if I were to walk up on you on the street, you don't know me from John, you don't know me from Sam, and I ask you, tell me, what are Hispanics known for doing in terms of businesses that they start and run? Tell me what businesses. Close your eyes and not look at this chart. Tell me what 2 businesses they know. Hispanics be doing. They be in construction and they be running food trucks. They run the Mexican restaurants. Listen, they run the, nice, restaurants. We like going to them. No shade. I'm not trying to be, any bias or any shade. I'm just saying, that if you were to guess, you'd be like, Mexicans be working Hispanics work in a lot of construction and they have a lot of restaurants, right? And there you go. The top 2 things right here are construction and restaurants. Why do I bring this up? So tell me, how does it happenstance that they happen to focus themselves in these industries? Is a baby born and they're Hispanic and all of a sudden they want to go into construction because they're Hispanic and that's in their DNA? Of course not. I just told you the DNA doesn't give that level of specificity. It gives tendency of desires. It gives tendency of the things that resonate with you. What happens is these people are grown. They're raised in environments where they see people working construction. They get kind of schooled or trained apprenticeships around construction, and they understand it enough, and it becomes natural to them to just go ahead and move forward with construction. And especially when they come into this country, coming into the U.S. where there's a lot of construction opportunity, Unfortunately, for some way, in some regards, it can be exploitative opportunity because they're looking for people who work for cheap. And if they don't have papers, these folks will just let them work. And then they actually learn their trade by working kind of under the table. That can be a tendency that helps create a lot more construction knowledge and skill and broadens construction exposure within the Hispanic community. That's just one vehicle, not every vehicle. That's not the only reason why. But my point is, it's the exposure to construction that happenstance to be very big in the Hispanic community that leads to them making their own construction businesses. You can't tell me otherwise, because I tell you straight up, that's where they are. And it's not because they woke up and thought that. So I wonder how they got there. It's because they were exposed to it. It's not because they happen to be better at construction than anything else. Give me a break. They wouldn't say that either. And then you look at food. Same thing with food. They grew up, probably helping out in a restaurant, and maybe they grew up in a community that needed food. I just watched a special on LA taco trucks the other day, and they were talking explicitly about how the biggest names in tacos in LA have been doing it for like generations, or rather they've been doing it for decades. Like they've been here 10, 20, 30 years doing it, or they have programs and they're just expanding. And guess what? They hire their own people. So this is how you end up getting into these construction and these food companies, because they hire their own people. Because I know you, we speak the language, and we know the culture, we're going to work well together. And so they bring them in. Y'all already know that's how it go, right? So we look at them, construction and food and food and accommodation services. That's where they've been big when it comes to Hispanic owned businesses in the United States. Now, also, let's look at one last group. Let's look at the Black community. Of course, this data is not segregated based on ADOS, the American descendant of slavery, or freedmen versus non-ADOS, but we're going to look at what it shows anyway so that you have an understanding. This is coming from Pew Research Center based on the 2022 annual business survey as well. And what we're seeing here is healthcare and social assistance are the most common sectors among Black or African-American owned businesses. So healthcare and social assistance make up 28%. Then we're going to follow that up with the, actually at 13%, you're following up professional, scientific, and technical services. So let's ask ourselves a question. How do so many people end up in healthcare and social services? It's not like all those people all work for the same dang company. Come on now, let's get it real. I'll tell you what it is. Basically, again, it becomes, for us, my guesstimate, and I don't have data to back this up, what this comes from is a propensity to have lower bars to access. Healthcare tends to be a field where, especially if you go in as an LPN, you go in as a health aide or something like that, the bar to getting the education can be kind of low relative, because there's so many schools. It's a very straightforward licensing process or accreditation process, and it's also a very straightforward cost structure for actually getting this certifications. And then there's a lot of demand for it. So if you want to get into a field that's technical or requires some formal training and you want some good pay, a ton of people who are LPNs. I know women who've been LPNs who are becoming RNs and so forth. This is a great field, but in general, for the Black community, what becomes advantageous that leads so many people over to healthcare is honestly the lower bar to entry, understanding that you just need to go to school, and then there's a lot of demand for the job. Additionally, social assistance, in my opinion, is another area where we become very, let's say, motivated to be involved in, because we have so much social need in our own community. So we see the need, we feel it palpably, and we want to get engaged. And so some of these people built their own nonprofits, or they go work for nonprofits. And then also there are social assistance through working through government and other NGOs, where we want to engage and give back to the community. We want to support. We want to really do the things that are meaningful. I work with a lot of Black women back in Detroit who work for nonprofits or started nonprofits or are doing community-based work and eventually become social assistants. I know a great girl, awesome woman I met early on in my time in Detroit, started this whole massive program, and it's his nonprofit that focused on teens who were at risk after they left school, homeless teens who were at risk after they left school and needed somewhere to go. And so, oh my gosh, it was amazing. And I've just seen a lot of amazing stuff being done by the Black community, and especially because we've been hit by these socioeconomic conditions, and so we have a heart for trying to give back and fix the situation, or at least trying to stem the tide, the flow, the bleeding in that area. So we have that on our heart, and we go back and we do it. That can be more so than other groups in terms of percentage, because we're so down. So here we are. We have a propensity in our community to go through socioeconomic stress, strain, and trauma, and therefore we end up creating these social assistance programs, and sometimes that can motivate us to go into healthcare because we've seen issues in the community and want to help, but also healthcare can have a more, not I'm not saying that it's easy to be a nurse. Let me go back and make sure. I'm not saying that it's easy to be a nurse at any level. What I'm saying is that it's very straightforward and there's not a bunch of barriers, especially there's no high cost barriers because you can take out loans and be guaranteed you're going to complete it. And it's not going to be like 15 years. It's not going to be even a 4-year program. And then also you're going to get a job in it and you're going to be able to earn the money to pay back the loan if you even had to pay for it. Because on top of that, because of just federal incentives and programs and Pell Grants and just other things that are available, you can get that stuff paid for, right? And so again, I'm just talking about how our community's situation has bred a 28% representation in terms of the sectors where we go and we either start our own companies. And it says this is actually, to be clear, this is own businesses. So again, these are people who might actually start out in healthcare. Like I just spoke about how you get into healthcare, then when you really understand how healthcare works, you start your own business in it because you have that experience. And I will tell you that the social assistance in healthcare can be very strongly represented in the Black community through people who do home health aid programs, or they go in and help the elderly, or they help people with like getting rides and things like that to go to their doctor's appointments. You know, people who run, you've seen these businesses, they have a low bar to start up, right? In terms of the money in some of these cases, right? You just got to have the licensing, the insurance, and then you just got to get out there and market your name. I don't know all the specifics, but I tell you right now, these people are not going off and starting engineering firms trying to build bridges at the same time. Like this, it's different. I know it's different. All right, so bad example. Anyway, I'm just saying. All right. So why'd I say all this, right? I showed the Hispanic chart. I showed the Black chart. I know I've gone already 26 minutes. You see, I talk like a crazy, crazy person. But my point is this. It's the pure diversity of people that really is the truth about how we are as a world, as a nation. And that's just now coming out. We're just now accepting diversity. We've historically, in this country, especially, the United States of America, we've historically suppressed individuality and divergence from mainstream culture. America may be leading right now in the acceptance, like trying to accept those who are different and trying to, bring neurodivergence to the center, trying to bring LGBTQ to the center, trying to do these things. But we have that rich history of cutting people down and cutting people out and expecting people to fit within a mold. These communities of people have found ways to basically to found ways to cope and to try to survive, to try to still exist and express themselves, given the inputs, the environments, the constraints and things that are put on them. And albeit they have to do it underground or in the shadows, but they still have found ways. And now it's just coming to light that expressing yourself as being different and being different are things that are important. And most importantly, that, we're just coming around to accepting. Here's one example I'll give you. There's this phrase all of you may know: when America gets a cold, Black America catches the flu. You probably know that one. So what does that mean? We already know what it means. It means when something happens in America, essentially anything, honestly, when something exists in American society, we get the worst of it. So it's like if America becomes rich, we get more wealth as a Black community, but we get the lower end of that. Same thing when America gets something bad like COVID, right? Or C-19. I should have said C-19. I'm going to think. When America gets C-19, Black America gets ravished by it, right? Black America was getting smacked around by this, right? That's what that means. But at the same time, it also plays into culture. Going back to Vivek's comment, we exhibit some of the best and worst behaviors of American society in terms of how we treat each other. Some people say it's like a hard, harsh love or a tough love. Listen, we love hard and enduringly, but historically we have been the most aggressive at shunning those who don't fit within, the molds of American typicality. That's like heterosexual norms, cultural norms, presentation norms, those sorts of things. We are the most aggressive against people in our culture who don't fit that norm, who didn't fit the norm, historically speaking. You may feel like we're better. I'll definitely say we're better. Am I saying we're the best? Absolutely not. So, that tough love syndrome is kind of how people kind of gloss over that and let it go. And we got to quit doing that. Tough love, we need to take a second look at that and make sure we're not disguising toxic behaviors as tough love, right? And, where does that stuff come from? It comes from history, right? Again, I said environment. Environment includes everything that comes before you and everything that touched you as you were coming up all the way to this day. And that means the things that came before you shape the environment that you would then be born into and you would have to walk through for the rest of your life. And the environments change wherever you go, but everything you walk through is something that's already been there to an extent, right? You develop innovation and have jobs and do things in an environment that already existed before you. You did not create the earth. You did not make spontaneous combustion of you coming into this, life like you spawned out in a video game and the world was built around you. No, no, no. This stuff was here. And so what I'm saying is that for the Black community, it comes from the oppressed history that we have and trying to conform and build familiar and safe spaces. We don't want things changing. That means we don't want unfamiliar things. We don't want things that challenge some level of normalcy and level of control, because we can barely build, or we could barely build what we had and keep it as it was. So we don't want anything new. On top of that, we don't have the mental breath at this time when you're running and trying to build and trying to take care of and trying to love and trying to do the things. We barely got bandwidth to be dealing with new stuff on top of that. We're just trying to get to the American dream. And so this stuff can get very challenging to have all these new stimuli coming in and these divergence from the norms coming in. I think that's one thing. And also, we're not culturally training our people to acceptance because we've been so busy trying to figure out how to keep what we got. So yeah, there was no capacity. So we run around needing people to fit into a cultural norm or a cultural mode because our community has struggled for so long. You might not agree with that, but guess what? The history has shown that that is basically all you got to believe. If you think it's something else, then tell me how Black Americans are different from every other ethnic group or every other racial group that you can conceive in this country that has somehow been better at accepting divergence in these methods and as a norm, right? Because we already know in our community, we got people getting killed, right, over being different. We got people who aren't even doing anything who are being shot at. Like, I'm just being 100. When you look at our real urban communities, this stuff is really where most of a good portion, if not most, of Black life truly is. And when I say most, I say just over 50%. Not 100% of Black life is in the ghetto, but Black life came from the ghetto pretty much, right? For the most part, because the ghetto dictated a lot of our history in some aspects of America. But you got to depend. You got to look at the geography. Again, that's a big part of it, right? And how, again, this relates back to the American descendants of slavery or the freedmen is that many non-Black folks run around, many non-Black and many non-ADOS run around saying that Black American descendants of slavery are lazy, that we're good for nothing, that we don't appreciate our country. But we all know that it's bigger than that. Every person who's a descendant of American chattel slavery in this country knows very intrinsically in their mind, in their heart, that the truth about our history is what has created our present. And our history was not something that we had autonomous control over entirely. We've done great things, but we had to do amazing things because we were in an environment that did not find us amazing. And through the struggle, we've had wins and we've had losses, and we've had accrued disadvantage, as Yvette Carnell says very firmly, as Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore have said, accrued disadvantage has become the reality. The accrued disadvantage that has snowballed from the past has become our reality today. And that's both financially and culturally. So when you take both of those, it explains very succinctly why we have today's situation. You got too many people who admit that and know that all the way to the government, but then I still have people who run around claiming that it's because we chose to just stab ourselves one day. We chose to be poor one day. We chose to have cultural issues one day. We chose to have, ghettos one day. What kind of bull cheese is that? You know that that's not the truth. So that's why it's so important to understand what I said in the last video. DNA and product of the environment are the biggest, indicators of where you're going or what's going to happen with your life. It doesn't mean that it's going to predetermine exactly what's going to happen. It means that it's going to set a road you're going to walk down, right? And so you're going to have to jump over the wall, but part of jumping over the wall is going to be, again, with you understanding that there's a wall, that the wall is maybe impermeable unless you get the right tools, and then you can break through it, and there's something worth being on the other side to get to, right? You got to think about this, and you're not going to realize it right away. It's really about, like Yvette says as well, you're only as smart as the ideas you bump up against, which means in the grander scheme, if you don't know if you don't have enough exposure to think outside the box, to see that there might be something outside the box, or to even want something outside the box, you're not going outside the box. And if you don't get the exposure that gets you to think outside the box, then you're probably never going to think outside the box, because you cannot be something. You cannot do something that you didn't know to do. You can't do something that you did not know to do. You have to have a way to either be told that, learn that, or arrive at a thought to do that thing. And that comes with every other thing you're told or you know. I can't explain that enough. One or two other examples real quick. I know I'm running long. Motivational speakers are another one I want to talk about. Motivational speakers cannot be effective if you just build yourself from a vacuum and you are totally a product of, pixie dust and your own wild imagination. Your imagination is already cultivated based on things you know. So motivational speakers are people who pour into you things that help inspire new thoughts and new ways to motivate yourself. That's why they're successful at being motivational. If they could not impact you like everything else in your environment can impact you one way or another, they wouldn't be successful. So think about that. Motivational speakers make this whole idea of being self-made not make sense, because they can't help you become something if you totally, and again, the self-made ideology that I'm referring to is the idea that you are out of a vacuum. Just like they go and they trash the founders of these big tech companies that got these big grants from their parents, or these, this free money, or these lift up, these golden spoons from people. You say, well, these people aren't self-made. Of course, they got golden spoons as their inputs. They got people who pushed them. They got enablers as their inputs. What did you get as your input? People got different inputs in different environments, and it's going to result in different outcomes. So a motivational speaker could be somebody on stage, or it could be your grandma. Okay. And last but not least, people are telling themselves very easily when they come and they say, I'm going to go find myself. I'm going to go take a trip and reflect and work on myself. I'm going to go try and figure something out about myself. When we say we're going to go find ourselves in a variety of ways, whether it be big or small, what we're really honestly saying is that we realize we're something that we don't understand. And if I can tell you that you realize that you're something that you don't understand yet, and you need to figure it out so you can be in alignment with that truth, then I tell you right there, you just admitted that you did not make yourself, and you cannot make yourself. You are somebody already, and you need to figure out who that is. And I'm telling you, that's how things really work. And so that's why things become difficult for us, because we're not remembering that we are having to move into alignment with who we are, or we're not realizing that the people around us are not the evil thing. Let me put this where we're getting the evilness. The evil that we see around us is created by something else. It's something bigger than the person who's evil. Take any person, and then the first thing you can ask a historian that has studied that person is, what influenced this person to become this? They're going to have a whole book to tell you about. And if they got a whole book to tell you about how this person became the person that they are, my proof holds strong. Right? So anyway, I want to land this. I just wanted to come in and talk about this. I know I talked even longer than the first video. I'm excited about this topic because I think it's important. Vivek really sparked this back in December because people thought that he was, I'm not backing Vivek. I'm not trying to clear his name. I'm saying that he had some good points, and it really made me think about the thing that we've always known in the movement for Black lives, in the movement for American descendants of slavery, in the ADOS movement, and in the splinter movements around just reparations. What we've always known is that we, as a descendants of American slavery community, as an entire collective global, not globally, but in this country, we didn't create the mess that we're in. And everybody who claims that we did is wrong. But I will tell you that even me trying to convince people to understand that is me just fighting against what they were told and they believed before I got to them. They didn't choose to be difficult. They're just who they are. Everyone's a blank canvas when they come out, except for that canvas is already constructed in some type of way. So it absorbs some paints better than others. And it can only be used in certain ways unless you rebuild it in a certain way. But a canvas having a brain and able to contort and rebuild and change itself only comes with exposure to ideas of what it could change to. Therefore, it can develop its own concept of what it wants to be. That's why the blank canvas, example or metaphor is really good, right? Babies are blank canvases, right? And you've seen people do awful things with children, and you've seen people do great things with children. Anyway, I'm landing the plane there. I thank you for listening this long. I appreciate you. And if you found this informative, let's drop some comments. Let's talk about it. Let's continue the discussion. I'm going to try to make these shorter, but I'm going to keep it moving. I appreciate y'all. Take care.